joining us today for the 2018 Education Forum. The Teacher Forum has been hosting this annual luncheon for more than 2 decades now. And each time it proves to be one of the most popular and interesting events of the year. Here in Darlington County School District, we are fortunate to have a school board that works well together and listens to the teachers. A supportive legislative delegation that fights for our schools, and state agencies that work with educators statewide to improve education in South Carolina. Today, we are able to bring representatives to the table for an insightful discussion of some of the issues facing our district and state. The answers you hear today may be tough or even unexpected, but they will be honest answers from the people who are making decisions and shaping our policies. We appreciate our panel members being here today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule for coming and spending this time with us. We appreciate our panel, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say today. We also appreciate our principals. Thank you so much for making it possible for all of us to be here today. I hope that you enjoy your lunch and the fellowship of friends and the lively discussions that follow. Thank you.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please bow your heads. Lord, we come to you today and give thanks for all our teachers and leaders, for their inspiration in our lives, for their knowledge and skills, for their commitment to education, our young people, and our communities. Please bless their work. Lord, we ask you to help us remember that the young people are our future. They are blessings in our lives. They need love and understanding, and help us to accept them for their own uniqueness. Lord, we ask you for help today. Fill us with your strength so we may rise to every challenge and not grow weary. Fill us with your wisdom so we may listen and understand. Fill us with your peace so that when stress and anxiety comes, it will not overwhelm us. And fill us with your joy so we may be inspired to find new ways to serve you. And thank you, Lord, for providing this meal for us. Amen. Amen. We have a delicious buffet from Fahrenheit 225. We're going to ask our panel members to please lead the line, and then we'll go table by table, beginning at the tables near the door. We will begin our program shortly after everyone has their food. Enjoy.
You all are enjoying your food. We're going to keep the program going. So now we're going to have the introduction of the Jimmy Newsom Award, celebrating 20 years. Some people were born to be educators. Mr. Jimmy Newsom is one such person. For more than 40 years, he worked in the Darlington County School District, serving as a teacher, a coach, a principal, and a superintendent. It was under his leadership the Darlington County Teacher Forum was born. In 1998, the Darlington County School District's Teacher Forum created the Jimmy Newsom Signature Award to honor Mr. Newsom and the impact he made on so many lives. The Jimmy Newsom Signature Award, which is voted on by the teachers, recognizes individuals, groups, or businesses that make significant contributions to education in Darlington County. It is only appropriate that the award be given by the man himself. So, this, like I said, this is the 20th year we have given this award, so please join me in welcoming Mr. Jimmy Newsom at this time.
Good afternoon. I am happy to be here. I've got an engagement shortly after Lamar's playing for the state championship. But it's my been going on for the 20th year. And some of the students that I have taught or coached or had a hand in probably had a bigger impact on me than I had on them. But Darlington County does a great job in preparing these young folks. You, the teachers, the teacher forum, Board of Education, the superintendent, and all the good folks make it happen. But today is a special time to recognize some folks that have done some amazing things for hundreds of kids in the Darlington County School District. Today's recipient of the Jimmy Newsom Award embodies our ideal of positively impacting the lives of children in Darlington County. It's hard to concentrate on schoolwork when your teeth hurt. Might be a key there. When this organization first started, visiting the Darlington County School District schools in 2006, the vast majority of the students that they saw had never been to a dentist. That's amazing. Over the past 12 years, this organization has provided valuable dental services for students at 20 of the 23 schools in the Darlington County School District. The trailer and fleet of vans rolls out to the schools and provides dental exams, x-rays, fillings, extractions, cleaning, sealing to hundreds of students. Any student can visit the van regardless of their ability to pay. That's a big time, is it not, folks, if you've been to the dentist lately? This year, this organization is expanding their services to provide mobile medical care to our students with wellness checkups. All our students will be served by their fleet of doctors and nurses, and any Darlington County School District student can use the service. These services, which touch hundreds of our students every year, are provided at no cost to the district. I would like you to please join me in congratulating this year's recipient of the Jim Newsom Signature Award, CARE, South Carolina.
Look forward, like I say, to a continuing good relationship with you all. One of the things that thrills me the most being in the schools is a little boy said to me yesterday, he was real excited when he came in the room and he said, I was hoping you were going to call me today. And I said, and he said, you did. He said, I couldn't wait to come. And so that's what it's all about for us. You know, we've established a relationship with all of these students, sometimes from one school to the other. They trust us, and we can take care of that dental need that they have. So again, I thank you on behalf of CARE South, and we look forward, like I say, to continue to serve your students in any way we can.
Thank you.
We have very special guests with us today. We'd like to thank our board members for being here this afternoon and for your support. Our illustrious panelists are today Speaker of the House, Jay Lucas. Speaker Lucas will have to slip out shortly as he is called for official business in our state, but we greatly appreciate him making arrangements to be here with us this afternoon. Dr. Tim Newman, our superintendent. Jamie Morphis, chairman of the Board of Education. Dr. Rainey, director of special programs for the South Carolina Education Oversight Committee. Emily Heatwole, director of governmental affairs for the South Carolina Department of Education. And of course you, our fellow teachers of the year, principals, and district administrators. Thank you very much for joining us today.
This year, the Leadership Council of the Darlington County School District Teacher Forum selected 5 questions from the many submitted by the Teachers of the Year. Our distinguished panelists all received the questions in advance and are prepared to answer them today. These are tough questions about complex issues. Each question by itself could easily require an afternoon's discussion, but we just don't have time for that. Instead, we have about 10 minutes per question. Audrey Childers, our Program Information Officer, will do her best to serve as the timekeeper, keeping us on time while still allowing everyone a chance to answer the question. Panelists, thank you for joining us today, and good luck. I have my stopwatch ready. All right. Our questions today will be asked by members of our 2018-2019 Leadership Council. Our first question is going to be asked by Ms. Kim Mack of St. John's Elementary School. Ms. Mack.
Good to see you all again. So the first question for you is a recent study from the National Education Association shows the 2017 starting teacher's salary nationally was about $38,000. The annual starting pay for a teacher in South Carolina is $33,000, ranking us 47th in the nation. South Carolina faces a shortfall of several thousand teachers every year, yet the pay issue never seems to be addressed. So what plans are being made to address the low teacher salaries in South Carolina? And along those lines, what is Darlington County School District doing to ensure the wages of our support staff are also adequate and fair?
This is probably one of the only ones that's really directed towards the local level of the school board. I have just a couple of comments on this, and the rest of the time I can sit this and the rest of y'all like you all. You know, there are a lot of things that we look at to try to retain, improve teachers, and to try to get their salaries up. And since this is only one, I may babble for a little bit, but first and foremost, what we've got here in the district we've been talking about is technology. Is technology. We spend an awful lot of money and made a big investment in technology with recently over the past 2 or 3 years. And what we're looking at is trying to utilize that technology in the classrooms. What I mean by that is we suggested and we're looking at and trying to get state approval for when you have substitute teachers or new teachers who have very little teaching experience to try to stream in classrooms that we had experienced teachers into those classrooms to help do 2 things. One, it helps to educate that new teacher or that substitute teacher and allows those students access to experienced teachers. Because let's face it, if we started today, we want to start paying teachers $100,000, which obviously won't happen. It'd take 10 years for you to come close to filling the vacancies we've got throughout this country. So it is not a short-term fix at all. So we've got to look at things immediately, what we can do. So at the local level, Ms. Sigmund again has convinced this board, and rightfully so, technology is the way to go, and that's what we're going to have to start looking at. It may come down to online courses for that matter. Again, that's something the State Department's going to have to give us a go-ahead with. But other things that we're doing here is providing teacher development, and that's something that Dr. Knight years ago was a strong believer in, and we've tried to continue that. So whenever we've got excess funds, we want to put it to the teachers to give them the ability to do their job, to try to support that. The other thing is providing a good work environment. Supporting our teachers and their decisions, and I think we do a pretty good job of that. And that even means when it comes down to the parents, we try to back our teachers. We want to support those teachers and what they do. And we want to continue to give our teachers or bring our teachers' pay, obviously to our local level, be above our local districts, but more importantly, get it back where we were equal to and sometimes greater or higher than the state average is what we want to do. And again, assigning bonuses and retention bonuses, we want to continue to work on and allow, be able to have that ability to do it. But let me just step back a little bit. You know, this is not something new, and it's one of the most pressing issues facing our district, not only our district, but our state and our country. And it will not be a quick fix. But one of the things that we would like, looking at the state and the federal level, is to give us flexibility in our spending. We're very restricted in how we can spend money. But back during the recession, just after the recession, we were given some, variable flexibility with our spending. It was amazing what we could do with those monies. So we always make the request to state and federal that give us more flexibility to allow us to spend the money the way we need to, because all districts are not the same. We've got more urban areas, more rural areas, and we just have different needs based on our demographics. So if we could have more flexibility, I think we can do more. Again, I refer back to 2009 era, when we did get that flexibility, the monies were cut short, but we were able to do more. We performed better, but again, because we were able to put the money where we really saw that we needed. You were the professionals, you know where it needs to go, you can help guide and direct those funds. So flexibility is one of the things we really want to look at.
Okay, and let me interject real quick. Representative Lucas, Speaker Lucas, Mr. Morphis mentioned several things about the legislature there. Do you want to address it as well?
Were you through?
It doesn't matter. This has been the only time I'll talk. The rest of my life. That's the only reason why I was going on with that. Against our state. Their hands are tied too.
Well, thank y'all for having me today. It's always an honor to be here. This is my 19th teacher forum. I was not going to come today. Okay. I was not going to be able to be here today, but when Audrey told me there was going to be no one from the General Assembly, I thought it was important for at least someone from the General Assembly to come. And one, thank you for all that you do. Unfortunately, I had committed my pressing state businesses to go to Carowinds for York County Day and ride the roller coaster at 3:30. I don't want to make it sound any bigger than it is. I'd much rather be here with y'all when I'm 61 years old riding the roller coaster. But this is a really complex question. And I like the question, but I think it assumes the reason there's a teacher shortage is because of pay. And that's not necessarily so, although it's a contributing factor. I think the question we should be asking are, why is there a teacher shortage, and to what extent does pay contribute to that? And when you talk about the teaching profession, it's a noble profession. We need to do everything we can at the state level to get more individuals in the teaching profession. This is not a South Carolina issue. The teacher shortage is not an issue that's just in South Carolina. It's really all over our nation, except for a few states in the southeast. Now, what causes that? Well, there are two things that could really cause it. The number of individuals going into the teaching profession and the number of individuals that are leaving the teaching profession. And unfortunately, for some reason, we don't have near as many individuals who go into the teaching profession. I addressed this question with the superintendents about 4 or 5 months ago, and the percentage of students now pursuing teacher education in South Carolina is down about 30% in the last 4 years. So we don't have the individuals coming into the teaching profession like we used to. You know, one of the reasons could be in South Carolina that our unemployment rate is 3.6% now. There are so many other opportunities to do other things that do pay better. So that's certainly a factor. I think the other thing you have to look at when you look at shortage is why are teachers leaving the teaching profession? And unfortunately, in South Carolina, this last year, about 4,900 individuals left the teaching profession, 35% of those having been teachers for only a 5-year period. Most of these teachers who left were the younger teachers, not the teachers who had been in the system for a longer period of time. So what we have to do is improve and continue to make the teaching profession more lucrative. We're doing that, but we're obviously not doing that at a fast enough pace. We continue to work with our colleges to produce our teachers to make more individuals want to go into the teaching profession. One statistic I found as I looked at this question is in 1969, about 75% of parents, pushed their children into teaching. When you look at 2018, you're down to only about 46% of parents pushing their children into teaching. Is it because of other alternatives? Is it because of salary? It certainly could be because of salary. But those are the issues we have to look at. How we get more people to come into the teaching profession and how we get individuals to stay in the teaching profession. One of the factors, I think, which wants an individual to stay in the profession is salary. I don't think that's the only factor. I think the environment that the teachers teach in sometimes plays a role in them going into another profession. The salary is certainly something that's very important. $33,000 versus $37,000. That's a lot. So what we're planning on doing in the legislature this year is dealing with salary for teachers and making sure that we're not 47 at the end of this year, because that is important, but also looking at the other factors that lead individuals not to want to continue to teach. And also look at, where we have the shortage and why we have the shortage. Is the shortage greater in rural counties? I think it is to a certain degree. There's some districts that don't have any problem getting teachers. There are other districts that do. What incentives can we put out there to get teachers to stay in rural South Carolina? One of the things that I propose that teachers who teach in a rural setting with a high poverty rate, if they have children in college, maybe we could let their children go to public universities for free. Because you remember back when we had teacher specialists and we tried to get Rainey good teachers to go, and then when you remember that, good teachers to go into Lee County and some of those other counties, we were paying $21,000, $22,000, $24,000, and we couldn't get individuals to go in this county. And I understand the difference between $33,000 and $37,000. I don't make light of that. That's a lot. But at the end of the day, if you put $24,000 on the 33 and say, we want you to go to rural South Carolina and teach, that's not even getting us success in doing that. So we've got to think more outside the box. So, the college thing, you come to me the other day, and I believe this year, as I said in my acceptance speech, as speaker on Tuesday, it seems like a year ago, but it was Tuesday, that we need to put education issues first and foremost this year. I know y'all are not satisfied. The effort y'all put in aren't giving you the results that I think you're looking for. Certainly, we feel in the legislature that we could do more, need to do more, and should do more. So I think it will be a big year for doing things like moving salary forward, but also doing things like looking at other issues that are getting these teachers to leave the teaching profession. We don't want our young teachers to leave. We want to be creative and make them stay. But we also have to figure out how to get more people like y'all to want to go into the teaching profession. It's troubling to me that the percentage has dropped so dramatically of people that want to be teachers. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher. I think everybody wants to be a teacher or a fireman. So I wanted to come today again. I have to leave early, but I want to thank you for all you do. I want to tell you that education, I think, will be a tremendous priority this year in the legislature as we look to do two things: keep our teachers in the system and figure out how to not be 47. So thank you all for allowing me to at least come.
And like I said earlier, Speaker Lucas has to slip out, but we really appreciate a roller coaster. I'm impressed we're able to do that, but we appreciate you being here. Thank you for taking the time. Okay. Mr. Morphis, Dr. Newman, Ms. Heatwole, Dr. Knight.
I would like to say something very quickly as far as support personnel, because the last part of it was our support staff and what we're going to do. The board and I had this discussion this past month, and we've actually started the process to initiate what they call a salary study for all of our positions that we have in the district. And the salary study basically looks at all of the school districts that are around us. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks at the districts that are, somewhat close by, but also looks at other districts in the state and says, okay, well, how much do they pay for the data entry clerk position? How much do they pay for bus drivers? How much do they pay for food service workers? And it's important for us that we are competitive with not only the folks that are close by, but in the state relative to what we have. So that process has started. It is a lengthy process. I've talked to many of our food service workers about this, and I said, it's probably not going to happen. You're probably not going to see results in the springtime, but over a 6-month to 12-month period, you'll see results from this. And then once we have that information, the board can prioritize and decide the best way to address those needs. The other thing, too, is that the Darlington County School District in the past has put a premium on teacher salaries, and at one time we were 10% higher than our local districts around us. And I know the board is committed to doing everything we can to try to get back to that and maintain it. It's a financial piece that we have to budget long-term for, but I believe when Dr. Knight was here, that we were able to maintain that for a while and be 10% above our local competition. So I think there are things in place locally, along with the state efforts and our legislators. One last note on teacher pay. I've been pushing this for 7 years now. I would like to see some formula, a statewide formula to be used for teacher pay that accounts for the various communities that people teach in. So, for example, in a metropolitan area where I can find housing within 3 miles of where I'm teaching, that's a benefit. When I teach in rural South Carolina, I have to drive to get housing. So there's a trade-off there. There's a financial cost there. I believe we've got people in this state that could put together a formula that accounts for every school in every district, and that may be a different amount based off of those indicators. I think you have to look at the availability of housing, of food, of resources around you, and then again you have to look at the specifics to a school. Some schools have higher poverty, and those students we do have to do some different things with as far as to educate them. Some schools have a higher population of special needs students. There are certain things that impact schools that make it more difficult, the job more difficult. I believe we have the professional ability in the state to put something together to analyze this and be able to say, if you're in this district at this school, here is the going rate for first-year teacher. And in this particular part of the state, under these circumstances, here is the same. And then let's let the teachers make the decision where they want to be. I'll give this up to be here, or I'll give this up to be here.
And I would say that the department has requested and included in their budget request a 5% of the state level increase, which is state funding that flows to districts to support that teacher pay. We're certainly very realistic about our expectation and appreciate the support of the General Assembly across the board with K-12 and understand this may be a multi-year process. But also with education funding, we all hear a lot that it's very complicated, and there's always a desire on the other end for accountability and knowing where those funds are going. And to some of the points we hear about Darlington dedicating funds to teacher salaries, that's a line that we know that when it gets to the districts, though, it's going to help with teacher salaries, and then also allows districts to have some flexibility in their local funds when they're not having to utilize all of those to support teachers to go across other support staff, because there's many, many staff in schools that have a direct impact and touch students. I'll quickly touch on the recruitment piece.
I'm going to stop you and ask you to hold on the recruitment piece, because that's a question that we've got coming up.
Okay.
And I'm doing a terrible job as timekeeper. So we're going to go to the next question. As a matter of fact, number 2 is from Nancy Fletcher with Mayo High School for Math, Science, and Technology.
The vast majority of lottery funds are spent on scholarships. Not only does early childhood education build the foundation for college and future success, but we are being evaluated and rated on how college-ready our littlest students are. What, if anything, can be done to redirect more lottery funds and more attention to early childhood education?
Yeah, go for it.
I had just gotten elected in the General Assembly when we passed the lottery, and initially didn't support it, but have seen it as certainly tremendous help. When we passed the lottery, we did it backwards, from what I remember. We passed the lottery, and then we had to figure out how we were going to have to spend it. And it evolved over time for a period of time that we were using 2/3 for higher education and 1/3 K through 12. Those figures have shifted over the years. I can tell you that early childhood education is critical. Nobody understands that more than me. Unfortunately, each year for the past 5 years, we're not spending all the money we appropriate for early childhood education for full-day 4K programs. Right now, unfortunately, we have declining enrollment in full-day 4K programs throughout South Carolina, which I think is troubling. And Rainey and Emily, y'all may want to deal with that. I don't know why, but I know it's an issue.
The speaker's correct, and actually David Mathis, who is our deputy over college and career readiness, which houses early childhood, to the point of this question, he and I were discussing that, and we are at the juncture, and we will rely on the General Assembly with regard to expansion. We're dictated on who and where is served with 4K. It's not compulsory and it's not statewide, and I think certainly if the General Assembly wants to move in that direction, there are clearly some existing funds. However, we do need to do a better job, and we're very aware that we need to ramp this up at the agency to try to get out to parents to get children in 4K. One of the things that we'll see is, yes, I'm sending my child. They show up for a few days. They don't show up for the whole year. They enroll for extended year, extended day. They're not there the whole time. Sometimes it's any number of reasons. And so trying to work directly with parents to encourage them and to help them understand the benefits of having their children in a 4K program to prepare them. And additionally, ensuring that we're spending all of the funds that are there. One piece of feedback that we do get is whether or not we're allocating enough money to really fully fund a 4K classroom. That is absent from our base education formula to ensure that you're able to attract appropriate staff, maintain appropriate staff, that we're giving you proper curriculum resources and professional development. And so that is something that we intend to bring to the General Assembly in January with some recommendations on how to ensure that we're maximizing what is there and we're reaching all of those students.
would also suggest that it is a critical component. We all know as children move up and matriculate, where we've got 40, I think it was about 40% of our third graders meeting results in 45% of our third graders. Yes.
You just got to speak directly into it.
Okay, and 40% of the eighth graders. We've got some work to do, and the earlier we can do that, the better. So I think local communities need to look from that K, birth to 8, birth to certainly to 5K, and see how you can work with your first steps, your medical communities, even the school district. I know we sit on a couple of foundations at Hartsville, and we're continually looking at ways we can improve the early childhood experience. In this case, with parents and daycare providers. I would also suggest, so as we look to expand 4K, you've got the question of access versus quality. And research will tell you, you can provide 4K to everybody, but if you don't have that quality built in, you just spend a lot of money on daycare. So you would really want to build in that quality for 4K and below, so that when children have those experiences, they are aligned with their 5K and first grade experiences, and we could hope to see some improvement as they move through the system.
And I would just comment that I think for those in the district this year, you've seen an increased focus on K through second grade as far as some of the programs that we've implemented, Fontes and Panel. Dr. Knight's actually been working on the K through 2 report cards that are identifying data points that we can track to make sure that we are doing what we need to do. But I think most important, when you look at 4K, there's two things that are at play there. First of all, most districts like us only allow students that economically are able to go into 4K. And what that means is that you have to meet a certain financial criteria to get into 4K. And so it's not accessible to everybody. And, you know, I hear all the time parents saying, why can't my child be in? And obviously it's set up for the most economically disadvantaged to be in, which we should absolutely be focused on. But the reality is it sets up two different systems. So now I've got a preschool situation versus a 4K system. I know the teachers in 4K in Darlington County School District. I know what they're doing. And I know the job that they're doing and how well they're doing with it. What I don't know is the others. And so I think we have to do a better job of reaching out to the other entities that are educating students and making sure that we're all on the same page, because those kids are coming into us 5K. All of them come to us then, right? And so we have to make sure that they're all at the same place, or at least being taught the same standards and being addressed with the same skills, if at all possible.
Mr. Morphis, do you have anything you'd like to add from the board perspective?
All right, in that case, we'll go to question number 3 with Rhonda Bailey of Washington Street Elementary School.
Thank you. What is each of your organizations doing to address the challenges of teacher retention and teacher recruitment in South Carolina?
And let's throw that one first to Emily, since I cut her off about that earlier.
Well, in a preparation to go very quickly, I made a few notes, so I don't want to take much time, but it isn't just, no job is just pay. I mean, I have a master's degree in social work, and my dad just looked at me like this when I told him that's what I was doing. He's like, oh, all right. He's a banker. He did not understand why I was not doing that. But my niece is 14. She just started her freshman year. She wants to be a teacher. She's wanted to be a teacher for years. I have my fingers crossed she keeps wanting to be a teacher for the next 7 years. Everyone that has given her feedback has said, but you're not going to make any money. There is nothing any of us sitting here really can do about that, when that is what a child who is starting her freshman year and should be on that trajectory to plan for higher ed is being told consistently. And so there's that piece of, just to me, the rhetoric around it that needs to change. I also know that y'all are under an incredible amount of pressure. There's a lot of public opinion about what you do in your jobs that I'm pretty sure does not exist in any other job, and that certainly goes for the superintendents up here too. You all are under an immense amount of public pressure, and that has got to really add to it. However, I also think with our institutions of higher education, and I am not trying to pass the buck because there's a lot of folks that sit at the table and point. It's the department that needs to fix it. It's the legislature that needs to fix it. Somebody else needs to fix it. But I think that it would help if we could all coalesce around treating this profession the same way we treated engineering about 10 years ago when we were desperate to have engineers, and doing those types of recruitment efforts at institutions of higher ed and offering those same, perks and incentives to those students. I mean, it's that important. It's not even about a shortage. It's that important work. We wouldn't have engineers if it wasn't for each of you sitting in this room. And I also think, too, there's some intangibles. It's leadership. Y'all have a great teacher forum because you all have consistently good leadership in this district. Not every district has that. Not every school has that. You know that. You get frustrated. You want to leave. And so there's that other piece, and hopefully that's an area where if we can provide professional development and support, and also continue to provide support to those first-year teachers, which that needs to be a partnership between us and higher ed. And I think that not one of us can hold the ball on this. We all need to share in it. But I also do think that pay is one of the issues, and it's at both ends of it. And I haven't found a state that doesn't have some state minimum salary schedule. Whether or not it's perfect or it needs to be changed, sure. We can have that discussion. I think in the immediate, we'd like to see some additional state funds, though, just directed to teacher salaries. It's not getting watered down. It's not getting lost in the noise. It's not a new program. It's just directed to teacher salaries to help support those teachers in the classroom.
And I'll take it a step further. I will point a finger at our institutions of higher education. I met with our teacher forum earlier this week. And if you all recall, I proposed a question for you all to work on together. And that question was, you are now the main recruiter for University ABC. What will you tell an 18-year-old that just graduated from high school why they need to go into education? Well, it's amazing what happens when teachers talk to other people about why they should teach. The enrollment for our major universities and even our local universities has not gone down. You have to put this in perspective. We're the ones that have the shortage, not our universities. So when you look at the enrollment for Clemson University or for University of South Carolina or even Coker, soon to be university, all of their numbers are up. So there's really not a reason for them to focus on anybody going into education because they're still getting their numbers. So we do need to put a premium on how are you recruiting people to be in the education profession. I'm a firm believer the best recruiters are the ones that actually do the job, not that have another job to try to convince people to do this job. So it was powerful. I took a whole page worth of notes of what you said are the reasons why you need to get into education. And none of them had anything to do with money. That's the interesting thing about it, is that we have to have a base salary that is enough to make a living and pay our bills and allow us to put food on the table. But after that, everything you all discussed were, I get to be a professional the way I want to be a professional in my classroom. Right? That was one of the big things. I get to create how I educate children. And I don't have to do it the same exact way the person next to me does. I have to teach the standards, but I get to teach them the way I want to teach them. Another thing is, we're off for Christmas for 2 weeks.
Yes, we are.
People don't take that family time, right? Let me tell you something. My son is about to go work for a very large corporation, and when I looked at his benefits, family benefits in this large corporation, they're $1,200 a month. We don't pay anywhere near that. So there's other things that educators can talk to other people about why they need to come into teaching, but we need to force our way into the conversation with higher ed and say, you know what? It doesn't, as long as your numbers are there, you really don't care what majors they go into, but we do. We have a teacher shortage, and we're going to hold you accountable for helping us solve this now. Yeah. I would agree, but not that I'm disagreeing with anything they're saying when they talk about money, because I agree with you. But sometimes I think you may put a little too much emphasis on it's not about the money, because again, there are other factors without question. But coming from a different area than everyone on this panel, I come from the private sector. So when I'm interviewing people, and I'm talking to people with educational backgrounds, and people that have been in education, are coming and applying to me for work, or talking to my businesses that I work with, they're coming in the engineering field, they're coming into my manufacturers to go work there. So while there are other factors, I can assure you, and when the survey that you talked to, I think you mentioned that you were speaking to teachers for the most part, educators. So I'll have to say that's a generation that is in teaching, but the generation that is coming into teaching, I can assure you, they are paying attention to money. You can see the heads nod, even the ones in here. So that is an issue that we are still, I'm going to put more pressure on that we're going to have to, because the competition is not only within this district, within the state and nation, it is with competition with other industry, the private sector. That is a huge competitor. So we're going to have to, you're right, quality of life, so to speak, with vacation, not vacation, summertime, et cetera, that is good. But we are going to have to continue looking at money, and that's going to come from state and federal. And it's going to take some time to lure those kids, people away, students away from the private sector into the education. Second, again, is elevating the profession. When I say elevating the profession, it's not only pay, but it's also respect. You know, we've lost that for our teachers and educators. We've lost who are teaching our kids, who are doing the next engineer, the next doctor, attorney, what have you. We've really lost focus of that. And if I were, Jay, if you were still here, wouldn't hold it back, you don't take this, I think, the wrong way, but I really would make that my priority in the House, in state and federal. Everything is driven from education. I don't care what we do, our economy is driven by education. So I really would make that my major thing. No matter what I did, we've got to address that issue and address it now instead of talking about it like we've talked about for 15 years, but nobody's taking action. I mean a nominal action. I mean a real action. I mean monumental. Okay. Next here, teacher development again. I'm a strong proponent of that. Any excess money we can give you those resources to learn. How can I better communicate with my kids? Because it is a different group of kids coming up, growing up in a different household than what we grew up in. Lastly, I'll touch on something that Warren and I harp on all the time. It's housing. We're in rural South Carolina. When our teachers that work here, they're sitting in this room, live in Florence or Columbia, and they're commuting, that makes it tough. But I can assure you, the moment that job opens up in that town, guess what? You're gone. So we've got to find housing, affordable housing here, to whether, and we're in conversations with city and county officials, what can we do to bring housing here? What can we contribute? What can we do to give you an $800 rent to a $400 rent? Or help you with housing allowance and so forth. Yes, that seems unusual, but the conversation's being had, and they're receptive, meaning the county and city officials, of what we can do, whether we kick in money to build apartments to where you can rent them instead of $800 down for $400, but housing's where you want to live, for working people. So housing is a big issue that we got to do in this rural community.
You can see why Jamie's been our cheerleader for years and years with the school board. First, I'd say Darlington County is really doing a very good job with teacher recruitment and retention. That comes a lot from our principals and the Office of Human Resources. In your core courses, I didn't see that many. I mean, it was less than what I expected to see. So first, I applaud you for that. Second, I would say there's a strong relationship, you hinted at it, between job satisfaction and retention. If I am happy where I am, I'm probably not looking elsewhere. If I'm not happy for whatever reason, and some people just aren't happy, but it does tell us if we recruit and we retain, then you're not going to have a teacher shortage. So part of it is you're recruiting very well. I think we just need to work on that retention piece. Think about supporting your teachers, and that comes from the board. Superintendent can only do so much if the board is not supportive, and then principals, superintendent should be supportive of you as you're working through issues with students and parents. But teachers got a tough job, very tough job. And the more we can support them in that classroom, the more apt they are to stay. I would love, and I've had teachers say this, I don't want to be anywhere but Darlington County. So we really want to continue to build that sense of community and that sense of support for the teachers we have. And let them come alone from Florence or Chesterfield. We'll take them any day.
Great, thank you. Question number 4 comes from our District Teacher of the Year, Laura Privet of North Hartsville Elementary.
We support accountability. We support accountability. But the increased emphasis on testing from the district and the state is coming at the expense of classroom instruction. And long tests for our young students are causing high stress for them. For years, I've watched little third graders sit at a table from 8 a.m. until dismissal, working hour after hour, 30-minute lunch break, hard on these state tests. And it's not developmentally appropriate, and it's not very fair to them. And after that long, long time of the period, you're not really getting the very accurate results either. The new state report cards raise the testing stakes even higher. How can we ensure the tests are developmentally appropriate? Who is monitoring the balance between accountability and classroom time and asking, is this necessary? Is this necessary for our students?
I'll take the lead on it since the EAC has responsibility for accountability. And they have looked over the last, say, 4 or 5 years. I know there's a report out in 2015 that looked at surveyed districts and looked at testing practices and looked at state assessments. Since then, we've dropped, and I say we, the state, I'm not sure who, I guess the General Assembly make that decision. For 3rd grade, you no longer test in all subject areas, it's just 2. In 4th grade, they've dropped, I may have this backwards, they dropped social studies. In 4th grade, 6th grade, and 8th grade, dropped science. In 5th grade and 7th grade, I may have that backwards, but basically you dropped some courses. So when you look at, from the state perspective, not necessarily district, from the state, less than 1% of the instructional time in any grade level is spent on testing from the state. Now that begs the question, what is the district doing? So one question, I would pose to teachers and administrators is, what test are you giving and why? And if you can't answer that, to say, I'm giving this test for this purpose because it's helping better inform my instruction, then I don't need to give it. I mean, it might be something you just kind of call down and look and see. So I do think they have tried to reduce the testing for that purpose. Also, I would just say from a federal perspective, they are required to give ELA and math 3rd grade through 8th grade, and then once in high school, it's also required to give science. Is it elementary, middle, and high? So you have to give science assessment at each one of those levels. So really the only thing South Carolina has added is we do the U.S. history in high school that I don't think the federal government requires, but my guess is that would be an important subject for South Carolinians to assess, and then the social studies. So it has been reduced, and I think some of those concerns, as you had brought them up, what we're seeing from a statewide perspective, and that was some of their responses to trying to reduce it.
And Dr. Knight's exactly right, that we have reduced some of the testing. With regard to the length and the developmental appropriateness, we've heard that, and we are looking right now to make sure that what we're doing, at least from the State Department perspective, I'm not going to get into all the nuances of it because it's way out of my wheelhouse on the details with testing, and I'm certainly not a psychometrician, which until I worked at the department didn't know what one was. But there are things that we may do, though, as a state, like with field testing questions and things like that at certain grades that certainly could add to the length. Additionally, one of the things that we have heard, and I will say this clearly, it's not universal, which I think I may be the lone wolf up here that'll say this, but to me it gets to the point of we don't need to be so prescriptive at the state level. I try to think of a plane like we're at the 30,000 foot, and then let's kind of let it cruise all the way down until it gets to the school. But online testing, we've got some schools and districts for 3rd graders that are like, that's fine. We were ready, they were ready, they felt comfortable with it. We've got some other folks, and I'm telling you, it's got nothing to do with rural and urban, because I had a school in downtown Columbia just was like, it's not our fit. It's not working for us. Our kids are really, they're little, down to like their hands being too small, but those are the types of things that when we do hear that feedback, we're trying to match up being flexible to the districts, but also meeting, and I will say this, and I'm not trying to pass the buck, but the legislative mandates both at the state and federal level, and trying to marry that together. So while I can't offer a specific solution, I can tell you that we are looking at it, and we'll be sure to communicate. When we do that, we're always working with the superintendents and go to the roundtables to communicate that in the testing roundtables. So we'll be sure that that gets communicated down. But we do hear you, and we hear your concern, especially with regard to those third graders. And so we hope to look at that. And then it's married. Not passing the buck again, but we do have certain federal requirements that we meet, and I'd hate to lose federal funding over not meeting some of them. So,
and I think from a district perspective, we're in those conversations all the time, and everybody in this room has heard me say this over and over about how we're educating every kid in the district, and that is, I believe you start with where that student is at the beginning of the period. You've got to know, you've got to have an understanding of where that student is when they walk into your classroom, whatever classroom it is. The only way you're really going to know that is from data from the previous year state assessments. That's what it helps us with. But you also have heard me say, I'm more focused and concerned about what happens on a day-to-day basis in the classroom, week-to-week basis, month-to-month basis. I'm not as concerned about what happens at the end of the year. I believe if we take care of the day-to-day and week-to-week, the end of the year will take care of itself. Does it mean that I don't believe statewide testing is important? No, I didn't say that. I think it's very important. I think that's how we're being judged against other people. But I think if we just focus on how are we going to perform well at the end of the year, we're doing a disservice to our students. Because the reality is every student comes to us at a different place. And so you all heard me say this over and over, that if that student comes to you and they're 2 years behind, we got to move. They got 2 years to make up. We need to move. That student comes to you on grade level, we need to move them a full grade level to move on. If that student comes to you a year ahead of where they're supposed to be, you don't just let them sit. You got to move them just like you're moving all the other kids. So how do we know that we're moving our kids? Well, that comes from a formative assessment process. It comes from benchmarks. So, but we can be realistic about this, right? We don't need to give a benchmark if it doesn't really have any effect on what we're doing. So if you all notice, we backed off on the benchmarks. We're doing 2 benchmarks this year instead of 4, right? Because if you look at how are we assessing, is this student getting what they need to get this year based on the standards that we're supposed to be teaching? We need to know that, right? I can have all the formative assessment data that I have going along, but at some point in time, I need to get a feel for how many of my kids are where they need to be, getting them ready for the end of the year. Map testing, right? We do map testing 3 times a year to try to make sure, again, where are the students, how are they progressing, how do we predict, right? Map is predictive about where we think at the end of the year for the assessment. So I think we need to stay focused, but we don't need to gauge all of our instruction around testing. We need to gauge around student learning, not testing, learning. And again, if we stay focused on a daily basis, weekly basis, we'll get where we need to be at the end of the year.
Thank you very much. And now we'll have question number 5 from Christine Ewing. And Ms. Ewing is from Carolina Elementary School.
I think there's been lively discussion around this last question. Last week, the State Department and the Education Oversight Committee released our new school report cards. While accountability is important, there is no doubt that there are flaws with the new report cards. What do the EOC and the State Department hope to accomplish with report cards? And secondly, how would each of you improve the report card?
Okay. Multi-level question. I think just from my perspective, the report card would be a snapshot of a school district, or in this case, schools with ratings, but also have a report card without a rating. But it just gives you a snapshot of the data. Some of it is cumulative throughout the school year. Some would be just at one point in time. So it just gives you an idea of growth. You've got a lot of different metrics, more than you've seen in the past. To look and see how is my school doing. I saw a lot of schools in Darlington County that really should be applauding itself. I thought you did a great job. For others that were maybe that didn't meet the mark they wanted, look at that data and say this is where we need, this is where we're weak. We're going to get into growth in just a little while, but when you look at growth, you know, did I move my bottom 20%? Did I move my entire school? Would one group look higher than the other? Am I, you know, looking at specific children saying I didn't or I did? I see some, I mean, I didn't go through every report card, but I did see where some of the growth was really good. We heard a lot about growth in visiting across the state before the report cards came out and after. And it seemed to be a hot topic on both ends. Before, the school districts wanted growth. And if you remember, for some of you that are really young, we had growth. Back in 2000, 2001, when the first report cards came out, we had growth that was growth. It was called growth, and one was called absolute scores. And that didn't seem to work because you could have an excellent and a below average. And what does that mean? So eventually they took away the growth. That growth was known as what is called a value table. It's not the kind of growth that we're doing this year. And that growth, remember the bubble children? So I'm trying to get unsat children to below average, and I'm trying to get the good to excellent. So we only focused on those children, not all children. So this growth is on the report cards, looking at all children. There are other ways of looking at growth. I'm not a proponent of any particular way, except I do think for our lower performing schools, growth was an important factor to be included in the report card. So it was so important that it was equal to the achievement. So that's how it is right now. I know Emily needs to talk from the State Department, but I also want to talk about what do we see in the future for the report cards. There were three things that really came out, and one was growth, and I won't go over that again, but is the way we're measuring growth, the way we want to measure growth. Part of it was not being able to explain it, and I think that's always troublesome when you can't explain it to somebody that it's just some figure out there. And then the other thing that came up was the primary report card we talked earlier. I am working with Darlington County on a primary report card, one that will not count, just one that will help guide elementary primary principals and give some feedback to Ms. Davis and to Mr. Newman, Dr. Newman, regarding the progress of early childhood, kindergarten, first grade to second. But if you noticed across the state, if you were a grade 3 and below school, you did not get a report card. I think there's going to be a push to have at least a grade 3 report card. Because you won't be able to have growth. I'm not sure exactly what that would look like. But I do think, at least my experience in moving schools is you need to have some data to look and see where you are so you can move children. And so having that primary report card, whether you get a rating or whatever, is going to be important. So that was one thing that we saw was important to add. And the second thing, I talked about the growth, the other was on the other end in college and career readiness. What we found is that that's probably the most important part of a high school report card. Graduation rate is your federal requirement. It doesn't really tell us anything anymore. Okay? You sit through and you get 24 units, and you can have a school that's got a 90% graduation rate, but it's not doing much for children. So that college and career ready indicator is really important. And so what the state has done is they've got a list of a committee, I guess it's through the EDA, that they have looked at the career pathways and what those certifications are. What we see a weak point is that there should be, for that career pathway, there should be a primary certification, not a secondary certification that does not show the skills and knowledge that child has. And I'm going to use an example of welding. Help me Robbie, is it AWS? The AWS certification for welding, that's the primary certification of welding, not some other certification, whether it be OSHA or some other secondary certification. Is OSHA important? I mean, yeah, a 10-hour course probably keeps children from killing themselves and others on the job, but I don't know that that shows that they have the knowledge and the skill sets of welding. Okay, so we're looking at something like that, so that you've got that primary skill, certification. That will, not having the welding certification, it's not going to help the job on that. They may get a job, but they'll get more money if they have the certifications. Same thing in auto body repair, auto mechanics, etc. So having those certifications, that primary certification would be something else that we might want to look at for the next generation of the course.
And that was something that we discussed as well, was making sure that when you're going through that pathway, that your certification does align, and it is not just, I checked a box and got a certification. I think that, one, it's the first year. We haven't had, we've gathered the data, but we haven't placed it in the report card format and haven't tied certain ratings to it in a number of years. And so this is a learning experience, I think, for everyone to go through and to get feedback. I think, again, if we keep our eye on the prize, if we need to gather data, and then that data should inform. And for us at the State Department, I mean, we need to look at that to figure out where we can target our support. Let's be honest, there's plenty of school districts that don't, and they don't need us, and they do not want us in their day-to-day business, and that's okay. We don't need to be. But we do have schools and districts that could use, at no cost to them, which should be our purpose of using our state dollars wisely, to come in and help and to provide professional development, and you work with the district leadership. And so that's one place where, regardless of what the data looks like, we can all use it, though, to inform what our roles are and what our next steps are and how we can help support. A couple of things we did hear from schools, though, and, I thought about what you just said about knowing where the students are. I mean, number one, everyone's meeting the student where they are. You're taking every child that walks up to your door, and I will tell you that sometimes people forget that. You don't get to pick who your customer is. They come there, and that is who you serve, and you serve them whether or not they are potty trained in kindergarten and ready to go and reading, or whether you've got to start all the way back there. And so I think one thing we heard was trying to figure out a way, too, that we can capture a little bit more of the community aspect of all the things that school is dealing with, which is a little bit of a softer aspect through some different data points, and then also capture some non-testing data points too for that college and career readiness piece. There's other things in the school that go on that add to that student's enrichment and add to that value of that school, and so that's something that we'll be looking at and working with the EOC to see if there's a way that we can include reference points to that data. I think, too, just being very careful about the conversation we have around them. Yes, we should use the data. Yes, when you're not moving your students, when you're not moving your lowest performing students, what can everyone do to come together to try to help that? But I also know that in reality it leads to frustration, and we had a superintendent yesterday that he had a principal. His first reaction was, I have worked hard. We are moving. We didn't move quite far enough to hit our benchmarks, and Dr. Knight made that point. Take it and use it and inform your practices around it. Try really hard, if you can, not to completely get disheartened by it, because, this is where we are, and it's the first year, and, this is a principal that wants to leave now. I mean, and it's a principal that superintendent does not want to lose. I mean, it's a good principal. But I think, again, trying for all of us to be realistic about the conversations around the data that's captured here and what it really means and what it can be. It can be used for positive. It can be used for positive feedback. It can be used to target support. We have limited state resources. What data points can we pull from these report cards to inform funding requests to the General Assembly? To provide support, and we all know that just a one-size-fits-all doesn't work, because what Darlington County might need may not be the same thing that Greenville County might need in their schools, and that's okay, and we need to be aware of that. I also know, and I'm going to speak very high level about this, because this is it is confusing data. I've sat through 3 explanations of some of the data points, and I try to be very careful to be sure that I understand them and I understand the calculations. But I do think maybe looking at things to make sure if there's not a way in a few years we can make it just a little bit more easy to explain and easy to understand. And then also MET and exemplary is one thing that has come up about where you have to hit on that in order to earn the maximum amount of points allowed. And I do think being very conscientious and working with the EOC to see if there's something we need to look at there so that we're not creating unattainable goals or goals that can only be attained by when I say our highest performing schools, I'm talking about like Academic Magnet in Charleston, the governor's schools. I mean, these should be attainable goals for all schools, but being very careful also not to go the opposite direction either. And so I think, again, it's these are growing pains, and we just need to get as much feedback. And we have 2 different places, and I will be glad to email this. I can get it to your superintendent so y'all can have access. But we do have some places for feedback because we need that for ESSA as well. Because we've got to keep these 2 things moving together. And we've got places that we can get real specific feedback too, and then kind of a catch-all, because we want to make sure if there is a specific area that we're clear on what that is and what you're seeing. And so again, I think we can use this as an opportunity to keep perfecting this system and keep perfecting these data points.
So I have a different perspective than our other panelists on the report card. And when I say different, in fairness, I truly believe the intent is viable. And I believe the intent is good. We, just as the question stated, we do need to be accountable. We need to be held accountable. I need to be held accountable. We need to make sure we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing to help our kids succeed. And so you can't just say, well, I think you're doing a good job. We need to know what are the metrics that we use to know that we are doing a good job. So I think the intent is good and valid, but like many things, sometimes the best of intent turns out to a very complicated, complex result. I have presented the report card to 3 different user groups in the past week, and every time I present it, I find myself reeling farther back in from it, because the complexity of trying to explain 10 categories on a page is very difficult for the normal person who is not in education, let alone if you're in education. I've sat in rooms with superintendents for the past 3 months, and most of them are still confused. Emily referred to the statistical analysis of how you get the scores, the curve score versus the percent the students obtaining. And I sat through 8 pages of a presentation with superintendents who all have their doctorates, and they all looked at each other cross-eyed. So, you know, I think, again, we need to take the intent and figure out how we can all understand this in a way that makes us comfortable with how we're educating our kids. Let me explain. The first tab I pulled up on the report card is achievement. And typically, if you pull up achievement, you want to say, well, who's the best, and who's the worst, and how do I compare to that, right? So in the report card format, you all saw some of this in some of the meetings that I conducted. I pulled up the highest achieving district in the state, and I pulled up probably the lowest achieving district in the state. The numbers correlate to nothing. I mean, when you're trying to explain to a parent, so a parent understands a 100-point scale, right? That's pretty much all they understand. And so one of the questions I asked yesterday, I know Emily was I'm sure you were processing, what is he talking about curving? Well, this is what I referred to is the highest achieving district in the state is 66% meets or exceeds. how do you think the general public perceives that 66% number? They're failing. Only 66% of your students are meets exceeds on this scale that you have, but yet it's the highest achieving district in the state and probably one of the best districts in the country. But the metric we're using does not explain. If they're the best, they should be at 100. And a parent should be able to say, okay, that district's 100, and instead that district is 37 points based off that metric. What is the 37 points? And then you get to growth. Well, the growth gets even more confusing because as you all, I've tried to explain this, and it's not the easiest conversation, and I appreciate, I'm glad to hear Dr. Knight is saying that, hey, maybe we need to look at this growth thing. The growth is based on cohort, 2-year cohort. Maybe that's my sign that I should. Sorry, Dr. Knight. But this cohort, I've tried to explain, when I explain this to teachers, they're like, I had no idea that's what it was. So the cohort is, I'm in 4th grade, I'm being taught 4th grade standards, I'm being tested by SC Ready in the 4th grade, and this is my score. This is where I land, okay? The next year, I'm in 5th grade, I'm being taught 5th grade standards by a different teacher. I'm taking another test, which is different, even though it's SC Ready, still the material is different. And my growth is being judged on the 2 years with 2 different teachers, with 2 different sets of standards and knowledge. And so I'm not saying it's not right. I'm just saying it is so hard to explain to even educators. I made the statement yesterday to superintendents. I would rather right now, with a report card site, I'd rather just pull up your school, have my label under there, and that's it. Because having 10 things to explain to parents about why the label is there, or the score is there, and this 40, well, no, you can't get 40. Actually, nobody can get 40. Because the only way you get 40 points is every student in your building exceeds. And there's not a building in the state of South Carolina that has that, as far as a regular public high school. So that's, forget about that. Look, just tell me if we're doing good or not, right? Tell me if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I can deal with that. So, and then the last thing, it's one thing to label a school, your school is purple, your school is red, your school is gold, your school is green, your school is below average, your school is unsatisfactory, your school is average. I'm sorry, that labels communities, it labels kids, it labels hardworking teachers that are doing everything they can to work with very difficult situations sometimes. And I just think that the whole label piece, that's not accountability, that's labeling. Look, tell me I'm purple, I can deal with that. But when you tell me I'm below average, what does that tell a kid, or a family, or a teacher, or a principal? There's so many factors involved with this. We got work to do. We need, the intent is correct, but we've got to do a better job of really getting to the heart of what we want to explain in a very simple manner to let our parents know we're doing the best job we can.
Thank you. Okay, that's our questions, but before we end for the day, we're going to go down and let's give some closing thoughts. Dr. Knight, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would just kind of go back to Darlington County. I think I would be proud of the report cards that I received throughout from the 2018 schools. It is, like I say, some probably didn't meet the mark that they wanted, but I would just use that data to help improve. I don't see it being, there will be some amendments, as I understand it, that are due March 1st. Okay, March 1st, so a short period of time to really gather the data and get back that into Washington. But, so I see probably minimal changes just because of the time. But, so with that said, you can look and say, okay, I can expect similar things on your report card, and that gives you some upfront time to plan, although you still already got half your school year, gone, and, to plan for 2019. But I would do that. I think Darlington County is one of the premier school districts in the state, and you continue to do great things, and I'm very proud to say that I'm a part. I feel like I'm always a part of it. Thank you.
You are.
Thank you. Mr. Morphis?
Just know, I can only speak from the local board, but from your board's perspective, without question, we understand how important it is to have a teacher, not only a teacher, a qualified teacher in every class, every day, to have the best principal in every school we've got. And we're going to do all we can to try to help that, try to put those people in place. As far as this testing thing and the report card, just know from your board's perspective, right now, as you can tell, there's a lot of up for interpretation. For those who originated it, for those end users can really come about a consensus of interpretation. What we're going to focus on right here in Darlington County is every child progressing and getting better every day. We'll do all we can do to make that happen and support you all in what you do. So I just want to thank y'all on your efforts and what you do. We understand what you're going through, believe me. And I always use our little test analyst, Ms. Walker, Ms. Haslett here. If someone knows testing, she knows testing. And I can assure you, if there's anything we can do to cut out any unnecessary testing, believe me, we want to do it to allow you to teach and educate. We want the kids to learn something. But we do need the benchmarks. Let's put the benchmarks in place, and let's move forward educating kids. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for your service. Without you all being here and doing what you're doing, it doesn't matter what the rest of us are doing up here. And so thank you. And I know sometimes it's very discouraging. There's a lot of conversation, a lot of opinions. I said earlier to Dr. Newman, I said, everybody's been to school, and therefore everybody has an opinion about it. It's like the one profession I can think of that everybody, I've never been a doctor. I don't know what to tell you about a doctor, but I've been to school. And so we appreciate, from the superintendent, from the State Department, we appreciate the work that you're doing, and we try not to let that good work get caught up in some of the other noise. And so thank you for that, and we always welcome your feedback directly, your district's feedback, because we're here to serve you all and to support what you're doing to educate our students, because without you and without them, South Carolina doesn't move forward. And so thank you, and thank you for inviting us here again this year.
First of all, I do want to recognize everybody on the stage that these are proponents for you and for us. Everybody on the stage I've had conversations with about how to make things better, and whether it's Dr. Knight and her history in the district and how much she cares about the district and the schools, or Mr. Morphis and how much he cares about you personally, or Emily from the state level and how these things that are coming down from the state impact us. We're on your side. And so while we talk about things that are affecting us, and some of them may be negative and some of them may be positive, just know that you've got some really good people that are supporting you, that care about what you do on a daily basis, and that want to make this right for our kids. Because that's really what it's about for kids. The end result is our kids being successful and being able to move on after their schooling years to take care of themselves, take care of their families, stay in our communities, and contribute. That's really what we're after. So we may have different ways of trying to figure out how to get there, but we all want to get to the same place. Know from my perspective, here's what I expect to see from you this year. It's no different from when I talked at the beginning of the year or when I've been in your schools. We have started the PLC process. We've started the data team process. We need to be looking at every student's achievement on a weekly basis. We need to be collaborating together on what we're doing right and what we need to tweak and how we can make it better. We need to have benchmarks on, are we getting what we need to get done in the amount of time that we've already taught? And at the end of the year, be able to say that we grew every student and we helped every student be a better person. If you do that as your superintendent, that's all I'm looking for. All the other things, we'll take care of those things. These people on stage will take care of everything else. You focus on the kids and what we've already started to put in place. We'll take care of everything else. And And I so appreciate what you all do for our kids and our communities.
Thank you, Dr. Newman. Now let's give the whole panel. We are very, very grateful for all of you, for all that you do on behalf of our students, our teachers, and our schools every day. Thank you very much. And now we'll have Ms. Laura back.
So thank you for joining us today for the 2018 Education Forum. And I hope that you learned something new and that you were challenged by something that you heard. Now I challenge you to share what you have heard here with others. So go back to your schools, teachers, go back to your leadership teams and let the other teachers in our district know what took place today. I'd like to thank our distinguishing panel for being here. So again, thank you so much. Being forthright with us, and thank you for being honest with us. And we are fortunate to have each of you fighting for us and for the students in Darlington County. To show our gratitude, the members of the Darlington County Leadership Council have made you a basket of delicious holiday goodies. So I hope that you each have a wonderful holiday, and maybe you won't have to bake so much. So we've got tons of stuff to bring on up. Lots of good homemade goodies in there for you to enjoy with your family. Small way of us being able to say thank you.